Hey, good Wednesday morning, everybody. BAM Weather meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you the second edition of Winter Weather Wednesday. Every Wednesday, we'll be talking about some of the key pattern drivers for the winter forecast. We'll kind of break those things down to you week by week. Look at some key things that we're seeing that could impact our upcoming winter. We're getting to that point of the season. Now, before we get to that, I do want to at least briefly talk about Hurricane Francine that will make landfall later today. And then we'll get into what I believe is probably the key winter pattern driver ahead, and then also some oceanic signals in both the Pacific and across the globe as a whole. And again, guys, we'll be doing these Winter Weather Wednesday forecasts, talking about pattern drivers, talking about outlooks every Wednesday, so be sure to check back in weekly for these updates. Again, before we get to that, let's look at Francine, because here's a look at the latest forecast that we're expecting to see as we go over the next, really 12 hours or so. It's going to make landfall, guys, as a Category 2 storm. That's the latest forecast that we have. We've been on that Category 2 train for the past 2 days now. Regardless, high-end Cat 1, low-end Cat 2, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be an impactful storm regardless. The category is primarily, actually, it's only based off of the wind. It's not factoring in things like storm surge and rain. I want to talk about the wind and the storm surge, though, because, anywhere along the coast here, you're going to be dealing with some storm surge of 5 to 10 feet. And so coastal flooding certainly going to be an issue across south central parts of Louisiana. These wind gusts here, as we work into this evening, this is the 3-hour max wind gust on our Clarity platform through 10 p.m. Just south of New Orleans. Could be looking at some gust 80, 90, 95 miles per hour. So power outages, wind issues going to probably be one of the bigger issues with the storm, as well as maybe a couple of tornadoes. That can't be ruled out as well. Rain and heavy rain won't be as big of a deal with this storm system because it's going to be moving pretty fast, but some widespread totals, 2 to 5 inches of rain, even into lower parts of the Ohio Valley, going to be possible over the next several days. With all that in mind, let's get into our winter discussion. And it's not surprising that a lot of it's going to have to do with La Niña. La Niña, El Niño, those are historically the biggest winter pattern drivers. And I would say over the past week or two, we've started to see some more signs of La Niña finally trying to get its act together. What we're looking at here are equatorial temperature anomalies. These are our oceanic and subsurface temperatures here. So at the surface and the subsurface of the ocean. And you can see that primarily over the past month or so, the coldest ocean waters have been situated in the eastern Pacific. And that's important because there's a big difference as we go into winter between years that had the coldest waters in the eastern Pacific or more into the central Pacific near the dateline. Here's a look at those years into the winter time that favored the coldest waters more in the eastern Pacific. East of the dateline and out towards South America. Those years include 1995-96, 05-06, 07-08, 17-18, and 2021-22. Years that were closer to the dateline with the coldest waters. You can see the purples here kind of right over the dateline in the central Pacific. These years were 98-99, 99-2000, 2010-2011, 11-12, 2021, and 22-23. Why is this so important? Well, it helps determine where upward motion and thunderstorm activity along the equator develops. It helps determine how the jet streams of the North Pacific could be shifted around. So it's critical that we figure out whether this upcoming winter is going to be an eastern Pacific La Niña or a central Pacific La Niña. If we take a look at the latest forecast, this is the multi-system seasonal forecast. It combines all of the different seasonal data. If we take a look here, and I'm going to move this real quick, you can see that the core of the coolest waters are east of the dateline. This, to me, is a signal for more of an eastern Pacific La Niña, more like these years here that we showed a couple of slides ago, 95, 96, and so on and so forth. Here's a look at why that's so important. If we look at our upper level pattern in an East Pacific La Niña, there's a couple of key things that I see, and I think the biggest one's in the Pacific. We get more of a ridge to pump further north across parts of Alaska, which allows for colder Arctic air to be pushed further south across the north central U.S. and into Canada. Compare that to a central Pacific La Niña this ridge of high pressure in the Pacific stays south of the Aleutian Islands, you get lower pressure and cooler air in Alaska. It tends to allow for warmth to develop more frequently across the eastern U.S. in a central-based La Niña. So if we have a more eastern Pacific La Niña, it's going to tend to favor more cold risk and more shots of colder air in our upcoming winter. If we take a look at this from a surface temperature standpoint, here's a look at East Pacific La Niña winters. Now, they're not insanely cold. There's a couple that are a little bit colder than others, but they're not insanely cold, but they're certainly cooler than recent years. And, overall, it would set up a more favorable storm track for winter storms than the past few years as well. You compare that to the Central Pacific La Niña years, they're very warm overall. This is a huge difference in how the feel of the winter would go as a whole. And in my opinion, based off what we looked at, in terms of all the different analog sets that we've looked at, the difference between the East Pacific and the Central Pacific La Niña is probably the single biggest factor to determine whether it will overall be a cold winter or a warm winter. Other factors will have, some say in terms of how much snow we get, how frequent the cold shots are, how notable the cold shots are. But this one, I think, will ultimately determine whether it's a colder winter or a warmer winter in general. A couple of other things that I want to look at real quick, though, ocean waters. Because how strong the La Niña is has an impact, too. And then, of course, ocean waters around the globe in the North Pacific and the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic, all that does have an impact. Our top analogs right now in recent history in terms of what the current ocean waters look like are 2013 and 2017. 2017 was also an East Pacific La Niña. 13-14 did not get into a La Niña. It was cool neutral. But note, again, coolest waters a little bit further east. A lot of warmth in the North Pacific, warmth in the Central Atlantic. So a lot of similarities to these years. Going back even further, factoring in years in the 70s and 80s and 60s that were also very close with the oceanic pattern, I think the key takeaway I have here are these years would tend to amplify the ridge in the North Pacific. This would support and aid in that ridging in Alaska that the East Pacific La Niña years would indicate. Why is that important? It would open the door for more notable shots of cold at time this upcoming winter. And if we look at these analogs and combine our oceanic analogs and our East Pacific La Niña analogs, these are pretty cold overall. Again, especially compared to recent history, this would be one of the colder winters that we've seen in the past 5 to 10 plus years. Certainly, there are some other things that we'll need to keep an eye on as we move forward, but if we look at our current winter outlook, based off of these analogs, if anything, you could make the argument that you could bleed this below normal temperatures even a little bit further down to the south. Based off of the Pacific Ocean right now, I would say that it is more favorable for colder shots this winter and more snow opportunities compared to recent years. We need to watch very carefully over the next couple of months the evolution of La Niña. Is it East Pacific? Is it Central Pacific? If we, get into November and it's starting to look more like a Central Pacific La Niña, that's a red flag that it could trend warmer. Right now, I would lean more towards the colder side based off of this research that we talked about today. So, big factor for the winter forecast, the East Pacific La Niña. Right now, it would be a more favorable one for more cold shots of air for the upcoming winter. This will be something we watch carefully over the next few months. Be sure to check back in here weekly for more Winter Weather Wednesday updates. Thanks, guys. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.